Hi guys, what you are about to hear is a recording I made myself. About 10,000 feet at an undisclosed location in Utah. Forgive the profanity, as I didn't think I got it. I didn't think I was recording, and, well, luckily I captured a few seconds anyway. I'll play it a few times and then we'll get to the intro. Thanks for listening in. Damn it. Damn it. Damn it. Damn it. Wow. Kind of takes me to the moment. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off. Blast off. Blast off. Blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off. Blast off. Blast off. Blast off. Blast off on another VIP episode of Hero Paranormal Podcast, broadcasting from the base at La Madre Mountain, just south of Area 51. My name is Ryan, the original outlaw of the airwaves, bringing you, well, a hairy, scary, be wary episode today. Great one for the weekend, one that I have been trying to get for quite some time. In fact, I blew it earlier, and Ron is such a rock star, such a good guy. He allowed me to reschedule, and either way about it, he is the real deal. Ron Moorhead. Yeah, there is, well, something very special about this show for me. One of my passions in the paranormal is surely the existence of a hard-to-classify bipedal hominid that should be in our fossil record, is in our fossil record, has been in our history, our Earth's history, and very much is like a missing link. They've been in the past. It seems like they should be here now to me. Question is, will they be here in the future? Either way about it, there is a real quantum aspect, in my opinion, about the big hairy man of the mountain. Sasquatch, Yeti, Wild Man, Yeren, Yowie, Abominable Snowman, all myth? I'm not so sure. And neither are those who have evidence of their existence. Well, our guest today, if you don't know yet, is the one, the only, author, adventurist, Ron Moorhead, producer of the Sierra Sounds. He's been known for decades worldwide as far as research into Bigfoot and Sasquatch phenomenon. To date, he comes closer than any other researcher to having a complete body of evidence. Audio Sierra Sounds are the only Bigfoot recordings that have been scientifically studied, time-tested, and accredited as genuine. Ron has documented his personal interactions with these giant beings and produced his story on a CD and also in a book, Voices in the Wilderness. Now, this is not Ron's only contribution, far from it. If you've heard of the Quantum Bigfoot by Ron Moorhead, he shows how quantum physics relate to spirituality and Bigfoot. And there's tons of other stuff that's covered in the book. Now, thebigfootstore.com is where you can find a lot of Ron's information, products, and they're awesome. Everything from coffee mugs to the Quantum Bigfoot, books, Voices in the Wilderness, audio recordings, t-shirts, CDs, latest research, ongoing adventures. The list goes on and on. Ron is the man. Now, interestingly, Ron has traveled the world doing research on the unexplained, undiscovered, and underexplored. He is recognized around the globe for the best Bigfoot/Sasquatch audio recordings known as the Sierra Sounds. This is the website where you can learn about Ron's travels, products he offers, and his continued research into the enigmas of the world.
Ron Moorhead is an adventurist, a positive someone who loves life. He's often living it on the edge. And this description by Ron's daughter is, well, my favorite. As a scuba diver, he swam with hammerhead sharks. He's been filmed in Mexico's Pacific Ocean riding the backs of giant manta rays and has been a safety diver for the filming of right whales in Patagonia. As a private pilot, Ron has flown his own aircraft from the Alaskan bush to the Costa Rican jungle. Besides traveling to the ancient Mayan civilizations in the Yucatan, he has also flown into a remote jungle area of Chiapas, southern Mexico, and an anonymous Mayan discovery expedition. What he saw was, well, thought to be one of the last remaining strongholds of the Mayan people. He has ventured into western Nepal's Suklafanta Wildlife Reserve to help assess the tiger population, explored the jungles of Bardia on elephants, and been in the wilderness of Siberia looking for evidence of the Russian Yeti. He has made 2 trips into South America exploring the enigmatic structures and non-human remains of the pre-Inca people. Over the years, Ron has been interviewed by several radio programs and has been televised by, well, everybody, including BBC and other learning channels. He was a guest speaker at the Darwin Museum in Moscow, and for years he has given presentations at symposiums and conferences about his Bigfoot Sasquatch experiences. He has openly shared his knowledge and accounts with others. His book, Voices in the Wilderness, chronicles his 40 years of researching the enigma. Besides his book, he has produced 2 CDs with actual Bigfoot vocalizations, focusing on the interaction and he and others have had with these forest giants. As a successful businessman and a father of 4, his entrepreneurism has afforded him the time and means to do many things. He doesn't consider himself an active participant in a man-made religion, but is deeply spiritual. Besides being a gifted entertainer and musician, he's incredible as a life speaker, and it's taken him worldwide. Unlike most of our culture, Ron has learned to live with nature on its terms, not attempted to conquer it. His story about Bigfoot Sasquatch is a chronicle that has drawn much attention over the last 40 years. It's a true story, and he says that it's been the biggest adventure of his lifetime. And as an independent and free spirit, Ron has had and is still having a remarkable life. I can't wait to talk to Ron. His recordings made such an impression on me. It's hard to explain. And as you heard at the beginning of the episode here, I guess I have caught a few of my own. But let's get real. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. So let's listen to the expert and see how he does it, how this is done, because I think it was just a fluke that I captured anything. And it's a lot harder than one might believe. They're out there, guys. So let's listen to the pros, figure out how they do it. Ron is a pro, and he's going to hopefully give us some insight into what this enigma is all about. Check out heroparanormal.com if you haven't. And that's just because that's where you can access all of the other archives to other podcasts. Also, for the cost of a barista cup of coffee, you can get them all. Or for a couple bucks, you get most of them. Yeah, just go to heroparanormal.com. Without further ado, let's give Ron Moorhead a call. Can't wait to talk to him. Mr. Ron Moorhead, welcome to the Hero Paranormal Podcast, my man.
Thank you, Ryan. It's an honor to be with you.
I feel so special to have you on because your research is something that I have been listening to for a long time. Not to date myself, but you've been at this for 45 years, and it's really good stuff. I don't even know where to start. There's so many questions, and I want to ask you, Ron, firstly, how did you start going down this path? Who is Ron Moorhead? And, well, where do you see this going?
Well, Ron Moorhead is the guy that happened to be there when this what was going on in our hunting camp years ago. It started in 1971, and we ended up having repeated encounters, which is unheard of at the time. And we didn't know what we did. It's a remote hunting camp in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California, and about 8 miles into the wilderness and 8,400 feet in elevation. So it's not accessible in the wintertime, but it definitely was up there as much as possible after these creatures started coming around our camp. I was going to, well, with some other guys as much as we could. There was 6 of us all together. Well, 5 ended up, but one of the guys wouldn't go back and scared him off. But anyway, that's who I am, and I've kind of made a pretty good hobby out of this for years and years, and that's traveled the globe looking for other novels that might match what we run into up there, which was kind of strange. But it's been closer to 50 years now, since that's happened. I started in 1971, so this will be the 50th year. I was 29 years old at that time, and it was exciting, yeah. So we ended up recording these things, and actually took an investigative reporter in 1972 who was actually looking for hoax, which we didn't know at the time, but he got caught up in it, and it was trying to find who could be pulling this off, and he ended up recording these things also. And he fostered some studies. Finally found a professor of engineering at the University of Wyoming, Dr. Curlin, who did not laugh at him. That's what I should say, because that's what most academic does when you bring a subject like Bigfoot to the table. And but he knew something was going on, even though he wished he could have found a hoax and made a better story, he thought. But this has kind of stuck with us. And so we had that credibility. He studied the sounds, Dr. Curlin, for a year and found they were not manipulated, not speeded up, not slowed down. They were genuine. They were real. And he showed how they went inside and outside the average human range. And it wasn't until 2008 till Scott Nelson, cryptolinguist, retired from the Navy as a cryptolinguist, a 2-time graduate of Cryptolinguistic School of Languages in Monterey, California, made a career out of studying unknown languages, or if they were a language, and trying to find deceptive measures in any language. He heard by accident on the BFRO.org site one time, and he came all the way out to Missouri where he was teaching foreign languages after he retired from the Navy, and he questioned us, got the context of the sounds, and asked, he heard them on the BFRO, and he had to interview. So he drove all the way out to Missouri just to talk to me and the other guys, and I went back and studied them also, and he transcribed a complex language within these sounds. And that's a big deal, because this guy is super qualified to do something like that. I got a pretty good letter back from that Chandristic school that he graduated from. And they said he's more than qualified to do something like this. And that's what he did in the military. And so there, that kind of puts the foundation down. He studied them and said they have a complex language. And that puts it in a whole other category. I mean, we knew they were chattering amongst themselves, like Albert Osman said in his event of 1924, was during his report to John Green. But, until you get a professional or somebody with a degree somewhere to really say all this, well, no one's going to believe you. Otherwise, it's just us up there telling a story like I'm telling right now, except this really did happen. We've got the science behind it now to establish the sounds to be incredible. And when you hear them, if people out there haven't heard them, they're on my website, and I want to say something that 2 of them are. But anyway, that's where we go. And I've been doing this now, traveling the globe up into Nepal and into South America a couple times on expeditions, just to study the elongated skulls. And I've been into Siberia. I'm in the wilderness there with a group of guys. Anyway, looking for commonality, I guess you'd call it, with what we encountered in the Sierras, which had some really strange things going on with it. It wasn't just the sounds that we recorded and the interaction that was having, but it was the anomalies that went with it, which was unexplainable at the time. We just kind of shrugged our shoulders and put it up on the shelf, but you can't explain some of the stuff with classical science, and it just doesn't make sense. So it's not just lights. It was strange sounds that you could not identify the source. It was just interesting stuff. And so I had to get into the science that just might establish what these things might be. When I first contacted a scientist, one of the scientists I contacted, when I told him about something that happened to me and one of the other guys that was up there at the time, we walked up from our shelter where we heard one of these things bouncing off. I called it because they were just making their sounds. And we thought sure we'd see one run away because it was still probably pretty moonlight night. But it didn't run away. And we started getting closer and closer, and all of a sudden we both got froze in our tracks like a force field. I described it in my book. And it just, what do you do with that? We could not move forward. And it wasn't fear. The scientist I told this to, he said, I don't want to hear about your fear. I said, we weren't afraid by then. We realized these things didn't want to eat us, or they would have already eaten us. So what is it all about? We just wanted to see one because they're really elusive, very fast. And it wasn't until 2-3 years later until I did see one. And that's how rare it is to see one move around. But I think we gained a little bit of trust with these things because we didn't shoot at them. And we went hunting them, and we didn't have any thought of shooting at one unless we were attacked. And I think they might have known that. But there's kind of a relationship back and forth there now from 71 to 76. And so I was able to capture some pretty good recordings. And again, they've been studied. So there I am. And I'm talking too much probably, Phil.
No.
Are you still there, Ryan?
Yeah, not talking too much at all. And there's no way about that. There's a very real quantum aspect, it seems, Ron, about the big hairy man of the mountain, Sasquatch, Yeti, Wildman, Yeren, Yowie, Abominable Snowman, whatever you want to call it. All myth? I don't think so. And I'm not sure that people who have gathered evidence of their existence, such as yourself, are prone to listen to naysayers, because I'm a full believer. As I said, I've been wanting to talk to you since I was a kid, and I hope I'm not. It's weird that these recordings you've gathered are not only jaw-dropping, but actual scientific record at this point in many people's opinions. How did you find yourself going down this path? And the provocative and intriguing recordings, how in the world, Ron, have you caught such provocative and intriguing recordings? There must be a methodology. Don't give us all your secrets, but give us a little bit of the intrigue, the provocative intrigue. If there must be a relationship.
Yeah, Ron, I share anything anybody wants to know. I don't have secrets, really, so if
cool.
This can help other people along the way in their research, well, good. Different people have different encounters. At the time we were having these, we didn't realize the significance of them, like Alan Berry did, the reporter that went in. He was investigating. And anyway, it just, again, we weren't looking for Bigfoot. None of us were. We was up there hunting. It was a hunting camp. And so we just, I won't say lucked out, I guess, or if you want to call it lucky, I don't know what you want to call it, but somehow these things started interacting basically more with me, I guess, in 1974 that I got some of these things recorded when I was yelling back at them when they were saying something to me. I have no idea what it was they were saying, but the cryptolinguist can't tell you what the words mean, but he can tell you that it was a language by the human definition of language, which means only humans have a vocal mechanism for the type of language we have right now, like I'm with cognizant, sapient speech, which requires a morphine stream of words, 10 to 12 words to make up a sentence, a sapient sentence, and only humans have that vocal mechanism, according to Dr. Lieberman at Brown University. And he made that statement. So when this scientist told me what could have caused that's blocking that I mentioned earlier, the force field, and when I said it wasn't fear, we didn't fear them so much then. We were just cautious, but we weren't fearful. And he said, well, it has to be either pheromones or infrasound. Infrasound, well, been used for a long time to control crowds and people and whatever. So I, thinking, they're not us, they're not humans, so it must be infrasound. So I kind of stuck with that for a long time until I finally started doing more research and realized that only humans can have a vocal mechanism for language. And that kind of puts them in my book anyway, type of a hybrid, primate hybrid, which has been given some kind of a human cross with the DNA manipulation. And that gets me into more paranormal, if you want to go down the paranormal rabbit hole right now. Mm-hmm. But you going to take the blue pill or the green pill?
Oh, of course.
The red pill.
I love it. And yeah, I'm really glad that you brought and mentioned Scott, the cryptolinguist, because there seems to be a very real sort of communication, which is key, I think, here in with infrasound, elongated skulls. I'll go as paranormal as you want to. I am just so intrigued. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've never promoted the word paranormal. I think it's just something we need to understand. So trying to understand it is what Alan Berry, who had a master's degree in science, says, whatever you do, stay with science on this thing, because these strange things up here can't be answered. And he said, don't talk about them or you won't be invited to talk anywhere, because academia just don't accept it. And he was part of academia, so he knows what it takes to get their attention. Well, I just came out of the box and said, there is a science that answers this, and it's quantum mechanics. And it's, people say, for years I heard people witness to me say, I saw one disappear, and I probably had a dozen of those. And you can't just keep ignoring all these people that say these things, and they're lying, or they're confused, or they're telling the truth. And until I saw, but my very personal friend saw one cloaking, and I've heard other people say that. So first thing I think, well, what science could answer that? And according to Tesla, everything is energy, vibration, and frequency. So if you go down that, it's not really a rabbit hole. It's an established science, quantum mechanics is. And if you get into what we are as a people, as humans, we are at the most minute level, we are energy, which is vibrating, and the frequencies. And if you can find frequency of anything, all matter is basically energy. So it doesn't ever die, it just changes form. And that's according to Stephen Hawking, that's according to Einstein, it's according to all physicists. Energy cannot die, it just changes forms. So you get into the spirituality part of it, where religions say, well, we die, we go to heaven. Well, quantum physics says when you die, you don't die, you just change forms. So you kind of got a parallel going on there, just different terminologies. And I kind of, in my book, The Quantum Bigfoot, I put science and spirituality back together, because I'm sure from what I've read, Einstein and Tesla and Niels Bohr, these physicists from 100 years ago, were onto that right there. And however, classical science, which is based in Newtonian physics, saying that everything is material or physical, measurable, predictable, that is just not true. Everything is not. I challenged a couple of guys. I said, if everything's measurable and predictable, like Newtonian physics says it has to be, then tell me how far it is to the end of the universe. Haha, I kind of stopped everybody. Probably got me kicked out of the club, I'm not sure. But anyway, there's things that are not answerable through classical science. Not that we don't have it. We live in a three-dimensional environment. Our world is a three-dimensional world. We have to go through linear time, and we have to experience day after day. And in fact, that's what life, I think, is all about, is experiences and how you respond to them. So very important. But classical or quantum science says no. There's other things going on. If people would just research this, they would realize that there's a whole lot more going on than what we see with our three-dimensional eyes. We see things with our eyes and think that's real. Well, it's hard to say it's not real when you see it, but really there's things out there that you can't see that's just as real, in fact, more real.
Wow.
So did I answer your question? I got off subject probably.
No, you're actually right on subject with the quantum aspect, and quantum mechanics is an established science, and we are matter and energy. Energy cannot die. I'm on board. In fact, it's interesting because recently Bigelow, Robert Bigelow, who owns Bigelow Aerospace, and formerly involved with a lot of projects involving the quote-unquote paranormal, he has moved from space travel to consciousness. And that brings up seemingly interesting things as far as existence. Why I think of the Moody Blues song. What is it? Why? It's something like the mind is the best way to travel. But it brings about another interesting thing. You mentioned cloaking, Ron, and Robert Guffey, an author who wrote a book called Camellia, notes probable military testing of invisibility, cloaking devices, and things of that nature. And I think that a possible other aspect of that is, you mentioned these things can cloak, or at least manipulate on some level on a quantum basis.
Right. Yes. And this consciousness thing, I've seen a documentary the other night. It's talked about consciousness and
fascinating
people who actually have, died and then came back and they brought them back. Well,
exactly.
This one person was dead for close to 15 minutes. They didn't have any brain damage when they came back, but she was flatlined, and when she came back, she was able to tell them things that were going on the operating table, which happened when she was flatlined. So her consciousness was still going on, even though she was clinically dead. So that was kind of interesting, I thought. And I say interesting because they're finally getting into this. You say, Bigelow's doing it too. Well, more and more people are. You realize that telepathy, that clairvoyance, all these aspects that some people say they have, and I think we all have that. We just haven't groomed it within us. We all have the ability as humans, made in the image of some masterful creator. We have been given dominance on this, not dominance, but dominion on this earth. And I do believe in UFOs. I think everybody does now, since the military finally said we're doing it, we're seeing them, we're feeling them, and da-da-da-da. So is there an alien component to these beings we call Bigfoot, Sasquatch? Well, there could be, and I suggest that because of the different aspects or different attributes that the mediums seem to show. And I've been in, like I say, South America a couple of different times on explorations down there, and the megalithic structures and the alien bones that I've seen and the things I've been into, just you can't deny that something with advanced intelligence has been here. And anybody that does deny this has got to get their head out of the sand, because something's been here, and many more than just one somethings, I think. So you got to understand why they'd want to be here and what the goal is and all that stuff. So there's a big picture to this thing, Ryan, which I think people should be thinking about, not just Bigfoot, but what they might represent. And if there's an alien component to them, which I believe there probably is, I think there's more than one type of them. And that kind of gets me out of the box too. By the way, I am out of the box. I'm not restricted by a certain paradigm or a certain disciplinary field. Other than, I'm not restricted. I just try to get into any kind of knowledge I can about these things. But if you stick with classical science, they said they're nothing but flesh and blood. Well, they are flesh and blood when they're in our dimension, when they're here. And what's more and more people are seeing them now. And I'm not trying to prove that they exist to anybody. I don't do that. I just tell them what I've got, the information I've got, and my 5 decades of exploring this phenomena, and they can take it or leave it. I don't really care anymore.
Right.
I'm 78 years old now. I still get around, and I still do this stuff. I miss kind of talking at the conferences. I love doing what we're doing right now, because that's the only way I can get my message out there. But there is a unusual aspect to these things, at least the ones we dealt with in the Sierras. They do have language. I'm not sure all of them will have language. It may not have been given that attribute by the creator, whoever that was. Mm-hmm. We have been given everything. We've been given this earth to screw up like we're screwing up, I guess. And we are messing it up, by the way. And I think that's why you're seeing more UFOs, more of those things being reported and all, because they don't want that to happen. This earth is the jewel of the solar system, and it's got everything that the other planets don't have. It's got plenty of water, a lot of species. And that's another thing they're doing. I think there's a hybridization program going on with aliens into different species. They want their they want their genome to acclimate to this environment. I think that's what they do. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the Skinwalker Ranch, the phenomena that goes on there. We've had similar phenomena up there in the Sierra Camp. And I just have to believe that quantum physics is the answer to it. At times you'll hear a sound that you cannot identify. In the daytime, you're looking all around. It sounds like a huge tuning fork right above your head. And you're looking everywhere. You don't see a big spaceship or anything like that humming around. There's times when, the time I talk about in my book, Voices in the Wilderness, that we lost my train here. We thought we was hearing at night. This is what always happens right after dark, at dusk time or into darkness. Always hearing our camp being torn apart inside this shelter that we had, which was a group of deadfall trees leaning against 5 other trees, which kind of a hutchy thing. And the doorway was just 2 trees split with a log in between it. But we heard these creatures, whatever they were, just ransacking our supplies out there. We had hauled barrels in on horses and mules, and we had them all cabled to trees because of bears, a lot of bear up there. And we thought, well, boy, they're really stringing things out there. We're not going to have nothing left in the morning. We looked out there later that night, the flashlight, and absolutely nothing had moved, had been changed. How do you explain that? You can't explain it. There's times we heard this sound, this clicking sound coming up from our stove area towards our shelter's opening, and all of a sudden, without it being open, it was inside, whatever this clicking noise was. We shine our light, no sound. Turn the light off, starts clicking again. In 2016, I was up there with my partner, and we saw this elongated light floating by our tent. Well, no. You don't know what that's going to do. You don't know what it's for. You don't know what's happening. We've studied it or watched it for several minutes, or not minutes, but probably 45 seconds. And it was just manipulating its way right through the trees and till it got out of our sight. And it didn't stop and harass us or didn't notice anything. Just a bolt. I call it, I really talk to people about it like it's a lightsaber from Star Wars. That's what it looked like. And this is filmed. I took David Pilates up there, the Missing 401 series guy who writes those books and does filming. He wanted to film it. I've known him for years and years, and I trusted him. So he's the first one I took in with his videographer to give a little data on the Sierra Camp. And he did about a 15-minute section in the Missing 401, Missing 401, the Hunted, that's what it's called. And I got about a 15-minute section in there, and he really did a good job as videographer on replicating the light that we saw. And it took him up in 2018, so it's 2 years after we saw it. But if you want to see what that looks like, they just exactly, because I was up there, and he said, just point the way it went. And after I did that, he implanted the lightsaber in there and was able to do a really good replication of it. So anyway, strange things happen up there, and nothing surprises me anymore. And about people's reports and all that, everybody seems to have their own experience when they do encounter these things. A lot of people who think there's nothing more than just flesh and blood. Well, you got to ask yourself, if they're a human hybrid, are we more than flesh and blood? That's when you get into consciousness and get in outside the classical box of the physics, you get into quantum.
Yeah.
And so people research who they are as a human being and what benefits we have on this earth. You'll understand a little bit more about these things could be, because if they are a human hybrid, which I believe them to be, at least most of them, I'm not sure. Some of them may just be a relic hominid from caveman days. But again, what we were dealing with up there has a complex language. It's very elusive, and they're very, very fast for their size. Mm-hmm. And they leave feet impressions on the ground. So anyway, I'm still talking a lot. So just give me another question before we run out of time.
That's the idea. I love it. That's why I have you on, because you are at a different level than most researchers. And it does seem odd that anywhere there seems to be dimensional quantum distortion, such as the places you mentioned, these amazing creatures appear. And it does seem that under the cover of darkness, these magnificent entities, to call them something, are able to exponentially manipulate their environment and travel through the wilderness with ease. What's odd is they must not only be manipulating their environment, they must on some level be manipulating our shared environment. And lights are a big deal in the woods. For many years, many of the quote-unquote Bigfoot groups have ignored the anomalous light aspect in proximity to Bigfoot sightings. Why is that?
Well, they're not looking for it. You find what you look for, according to Abraham Lincoln, or who was it? Maybe it was Winston Churchill. I believe that. You find what you look for. If they're not looking for anything outside of their paradigm, they've arranged for themselves, they won't find it probably. It was just by accident that Patterson got his film, that we got these sounds. I say accident, it was just part of what we were designed for, I guess. I'm not sure, but again, it's all vibration and energy, and if these things can go out of our perception, which they do, and how do they do that? Are they interdimensional? Do they go into another dimension? Are they just, we only see within parameters of light, our parameters, and we have visual parameters. A camera can see more than our eyes can see. And it's just really interesting how they might do that. If they can change their vibrational frequency to something, I think it's had to be lowered to get into our dimension, but they can raise it with their vocal mechanism, which is extremely unique, by the way, in the studies we've done. Nothing's like it. If they can change their vibrational frequency to something that would go out of our perception, that it takes them to another dimension, or they have an attribute that allows them to cloak in this dimension. There's 11 dimensions according to quantum physics, and if they go into like the fourth dimension is considered time, and that's where I think a lot of these people see them in a cloaking form, is when they're going through that fourth dimension into the fifth, perhaps. And I'm way out there on all this, but that is my thoughts. If they could do that, that's also where people witness ghosts, is in that fourth dimension, when they can see them or get some kind of effect from them, but they can't. These things are stuck in there. They can't quite get the vibrational frequency high enough to get into a higher dimension, which we're all designed to be going to at some point in our life, or in the afterlife. You know how you want to look at that.
Mm-hmm. So amazing. So amazing.
Did I answer that question?
Yeah.
Or was there a question? That quantum entanglement is what I was going to mention too, is people say they can read their minds or get into their thoughts or stuff like that. They asked me if that happened to me. Well, I don't know. I was very analytical, I still am, and you have to kind of relax and get into pretty much closer to the human frequency, resonance frequency, which is what the Earth gets down to at nighttime and what most people settle into when you go into your alpha to theta state of awareness. And I write about this in my quantum book because it kind of answers a lot of these questions that people have. How they do that? And a lot of people won't even talk about it until they realize you're open to it, and then they'll tell you about it, and that's what I found. But the quantum entanglement is something we can all do. That's how telepathy works. That's how we just haven't learned how to access the pineal gland, which is in the middle of our head, and how to make it in coherence with your brain, which is in the front of your head, for most people, or part of it anyway. And how to make all that in coherence with your heart. Your heart has more energy than any part of your body. And you got to get that heart-mind coherence going on and have all that connected to the pineal gland, which is the third eye of Horus. You see that depicted a lot in hieroglyphs and all. If you can access that, it has all the attributes of an eyeball, but it doesn't have the eyeball. Mm-hmm. But it can see and it knows. I think that's where you can receive information via meditation, and that's where a lot of things happen. It's right in the middle of the head. I got a whole chapter of that in my book, too. It's really interesting stuff. You get into how things really are working and just start reading about it. So there's where I'm at with the quantum entanglement and telepathy and all that. And again, it's all about vibration as far as it can disappear. I think it's done through vibration.
Yeah.
That's how they move those big megalithic structures that I witnessed out in Peru and Bolivia. There's things down there that just, I don't know to this day how it was done. I think it's done through sound vibration. If you're in the right frequency, you can manipulate anything. And that's a hard one to swallow. But that's how I think Christ in the Bible did his miracles. How the masters do their miracles is through frequency, vibration, alteration. Mm-hmm. And you find the frequency of anything, you can manipulate it.
Yes, I agree. And I'm glad, intrigued that you mentioned the heart being such a powerful organ, because it is vibrational, and some of the more recent scientific studies have shown that it's less of a pump and more, like you're saying, just a harmonious vibrational organ. And when it comes to your research, you say by accident that you came across it, but it seems like a beautiful synchronicity to me, Ron. There's so many cases of footprints ending in snow, marshland, and sand. I can't think of anything better than the quantum explanation to explain this. Is there?
Well, that's it for me. It's got to be in the quantum field of reality. Mm-hmm. And that's just where I go with it. And I just keep, the more I look into that, the more it makes so much sense. Just got to understand it a little bit, because so many people can't wrap their head around quantum physics, so they just throw the book on the shelf somewhere. But there's a lot of books on it. There's a lot of people saying now what I've been saying for years. There's something going on with these things, and it must be in the quantum realm. There's a lot of information on the quantum physics and quantum mechanics that people should research before they call a thing a hoax or something that's not real. But the other thing that bothers me a little bit is when someone says, oh, this was not real. They backed their truck up to some place and had a six-pack open and recorded some phony sounds. Well, it's not quite like that. If you see that 411, the missing hunters, missing 411, the hunt that David put together, you'll see just what an effort it takes to get into that camp, and how ludicrous it'd be for anyone to even try to do what was obviously done back there. So these things are back there somewhere, and they're still around the Sierra. You hear a lot of reports of these things. And I live in Washington now, and a lot of reports here, a lot of reports. Kind of miss, like I say, giving my talks at these conferences and things. There's only one been held this year. I'm supposed to be on with George Norrie later this year somewhere, but that's the only one that's really scheduled. It's physical. Mm-hmm. The rest of them are like this podcast, which I like.
Yeah. Well, cool. It is. Yeah. It's so intriguing. You've surely come across Brian Forrester's work, I'd assume, but I think your work melds very well with some of his work. And a question that I can't let you go without asking, what kind of equipment are you using to gather such amazing sounds? And I'm sure you've heard everybody's heard so many of I wanted to get into some of the individual recordings, and the events, but we don't have to do that. Let's just because of time. What kind of equipment are you using? Because the sound quality is phenomenal.
Well, it was just a cassette recorder. That's all we had in the 70s. And that's what we used, just cassettes. I had a little, I had an RCA portable, the best ones you could buy, and I recorded some really fantastic sound. I had stereo mics on each side of the shelter sticking through the walls, and you could hear these things walking around, crunch out there. And I had a house fire, though, and burned everything up. After that, I went into just a smaller cassette player, because these sounds they're interesting, but again, you don't know what they're saying, so you don't know what to do with it. We've got hours of these sounds between the five of us that were up there recording, and so it's really just cassettes, that's all. What I suggest to people, though, is use brand new cassettes. If you're going to go out in the woods, don't tape over them. Al Berry knew that, so those are the ones that got studied at the University of Wyoming. What we would do is we'd go back and just save and not have to go to the store and buy more cassettes. We'd tape over the ones we had and went back up there again, which is not what you're supposed to do. But all my tapes got burned up in my house fire, along with our equipment and everything, in 1970-something. So I missed that, because I had some absolutely really It's on my website, Bigfoot Recordings, and it's Al Berry's story, the investigative report that went in. It's narrated by Jonathan Frakes, Star Trek Next Generation.
Which is so great.
And produced that down in Burbank years ago. And finally, Al Berry, prior to his passing, he mentioned that I should write a book, and I ended up actually producing my second CD also, which was my personal interaction with these things. The wood pounding, the whooping sounds, the rock clacking, the actual vocalizations. They call it the samurai chatter online.
My
it's
favorite.
Very oriental. So that's where that was coined. Actually, Matt Moneymaker from BFRO.org, he coined that just before he started BFRO as it sounds like a samurai.
Really does.
Anyway, that stuck with it. So, but it's a complex language. And again, it takes a special mechanism in your vocal range to do this stuff. And nobody can duplicate it. I've been I can make that sound. Well, you can't either.
No, you can't. Sorry.
You can't do it exactly like that. You just can't. It can't be done according to the people that studied it. I've had more than just Scott Nelson and Professor Crone look at these things. Mm-hmm. And they challenge anyone to try to do that. The frequencies are so high and they go so low, and they go in our language and outside our language, so they can pronounce. They can call your dog's name when you're out in the woods when the dog's not around. They can call your name, and you won't know who's over there. There's all kinds of telltale things they do to toy with people, and I got to say that about that. They do toy with people because they think that we think we're smarter than them, and they got to step up on us in the woods. That's for sure.
Yes, and it's also wild that you mentioned Matt Moneymaker. I've investigated with Matt, great guy, and he definitely has the passion. Ron, you are bar none the type of researcher that are among my favorite. The passion is obvious that you have, and you touched on the fact of what are they saying. And when I heard the samurai that you mentioned, it is so it touches you on a deep level because, well, did you have any feelings about what was being said? There seems to be a message vocalized or an intention.
You know, I think mine, it was a question. Several of them were, anyway, that night. I was recording. It was just me and one of the guys up there. We came in early with the horses and we were bringing supplies in. And these things had got there before we did. I mean, whoever was doing this up there was not human, not completely anyway. And they're very intuitive. I think when we left out to packed our mules and got on the trail, something startled them, probably about a quarter mile up the trail. We wasn't sure what it was, didn't make a big deal because it could be a bear, it could be a deer, it could be a mountain lion, it could be anything. But they started jumping around, and we just kept going. And another mile or so up the trail, I noticed, I was the lead horse, a big track perpendicular to the trail. And it just, like it was purposely left there. Nobody else had been on the trail at that time. At least no humans, some bear tracks and stuff like that. But I took a picture of it, wiped it out, and kept going. But that kind of told us, hey, maybe that's what messed with us down below there, when animals got startled. When we got to camp, this is the night I started recording them because I missed the first 12 minutes of it because I could get my stereo or my cassette set up in time. But they started pounding on rocks and making big snaps and big wood snaps and stuff like that. And you hear that and you notice them because nothing else does that up there to the definition these things have. And you hear the whooping sounds when you don't react to that stuff. Because whatever you do, don't get out there and shine a flashlight. That will get rid of them real quick. They don't want to be exposed. And when they're in the physical dimension, they don't want to be seen. And anyway, after that, you just keep ignoring them like we were doing. They get closer and closer, and first thing you know, they started yelling at me. And I said yelling. It was some kind of a question being asked, in my opinion. So I started mimicking them calling back. But we underestimated what they were still at that time. Didn't know what they were. Still don't know, but we sure having a heck of a time up there. Scary at first, that's for sure, but after you get used to it, you realize, these sounds they're making isn't arguing over who's going to eat you first. They're arguing over maybe how close should they get to you. That's pinheaded humans. Well, we weren't, again, none of us looking for Bigfoot. It's a hunting camp. And they've actually used since 1958 by the Johnson brothers. And this didn't happen to them until 71. And they were the first two when it happened originally. They thought it was probably a bear tearing up something out there first, but they went out and looked and found this big print in the mud. And they realized this is not a bear. They were avid hunters, and these guys could, wow, good hunters. And so they came out and told the other guys, and they went back up. I wasn't part of the hunting group at that time. I was just friends with them all. So I kind of knew they were hunting, and there was a special place they go to, but I didn't have any interest in it at that time, and hadn't been invited anyway. But one of the guys that got scared off up there the first time, he went back up thinking, there's some bear mess with him or something like that, and he experienced it, and he shot out of there the next day. He just left a note saying, "See you guys at the bottom," and he wouldn't go back.
Sure.
And the guys didn't come out when they were supposed to, the other guys. So the wives were all worried. And he asked if I could go back with him because they wanted to know if the guys were okay. At that time, you don't know what kind of monster you're dealing with, if it is a monster. So I went back up, and that's how I got involved in the camp, and that's when I started hunting and doing all the things the other guys did. I don't hunt it there anymore, but I still go back. I get off trail again?
No, not at all. That's right on, right on. It is... The camp, I mean, my gosh, talk about very... Did you, in this area, did you hear any other sounds? It's just so fascinating that these vocalizations, in my opinion, they share so much with, oftentimes people mention in these quantum dynamics, they talk of disembodied voices, and the chatter seems to be similar. Now, the vocalization is not. The strength and the deepness and the vocal cords must be like radiator hoses, because the deepness that some of these sounds come across and the lengths that they travel in the wilderness are fascinating. But it seems that there is some kind of otherworldly aspect to this, and I think you touched on that and explained it really well, Ron. You've fulfilled one of my all-time goals, talking to you about one of the most provocative and biggest questions of our existence. And who exactly are we sharing our forests with? Ron, I want to mention one thing. I went into a very lengthy intro before we spoke about the products, literature, and websites. But can you go over where listeners can access your work, research, and products as well?
Sure. My 2 books are available on Amazon or KDP downloads. My website is ronmoorhead.com, spelled with 1 O. And you can read about me and some of the articles I've written and places I've been to on that. There's also a couple sound bites you can listen to. And anyway, BigfootSounds.com or ronmoorhead.com will get people there. The CDs are available there too on my homepage. You can see where you can order them. They're about 40 minutes long each. One, again, was narrated by Jonathan Frakes, Star Trek, and then the other one is narrated by myself. And they're both about 40 minutes with integrated Bigfoot sounds in them. When you get to the context of the sound I was talking about, you can hear the sound. And that's on the download. In the books, now, the one that's on KDP does not come with a CD. I got a download in there because I couldn't get them to hack a CD with all that stuff, and just out of range cost-wise. So what I've done is I offered the book with the CD, full color version, on my website, and the other one is from Amazon, and it's less money, but it doesn't come with a CD. It just comes with a CD, the download of the sound. So when you get to the context, you can hear the sound I'm talking about. That's how people find me. They want me.
It's pretty good.
I got to say this about it all, though. I think there's a bigger story and a bigger picture than just Bigfoot in this. The alien alien aspect, the component probably these beings have. They're unusual. They're very mystical, and don't be surprised if you're out in the woods and you hear some talking, chattering going on. It would be a couple of them things talking about you, but they're not, in my opinion anyway, they're not, most of them are not there to hurt you. I don't think they're supposed to mess with our karma, what we're supposed to experience. That's what our place here on Earth is all about, is experiences that we're going to have and how we respond to them. And to respond to them in a caring, compassionate manner. That's what's important, I think, in the whole scheme of it all. And that's what raises your own personal vibration. I mentioned earlier the Schumann resonance. That's the Earth's frequency at night when it settles down and the sun's not shining. And when you settle down and you're not shining anymore either, and you start relaxing, get out of the analytical mode, and just relax, you kind of fall into a alpha state, which is out of the beta state, which we're in now. It takes you right into the theta state, which is the state between where you have lucid dreams, and your alpha state is where you're aware, but you're just relaxed. You're not thinking. You're just fixed to pass off into a sleep. Theta is where you get your answers, and you go into built after that, and that's a deep sleep. And that's where you'll have your dreams. That's where Tesla had a lot of his answers to the problems. You come up out the next morning after sleeping, and you got the answer to your problem. So it's a good idea to sleep on your problem before you try to make a decision how to respond to it. Just make sure I just support, respond to everything in love and caring and have compassion for other people. And that will help you as a person, no matter what they've done. You need to keep yourself up there and try to respond to things properly. So the bigger picture is, it gets into a lot more than what we have time to talk about here, but it's I think, very, very important for people to realize we're in a unique time right now. I know I've been told this year after year, or since I was born, I think, well, in 10 years, this Earth won't be here. Well, I think we better open our eyes. There's a reason the Space Force was created. There's a reason that more and more people are seeing these UFOs. There's a reason that the military has declassified the stuff about UFOs. And people are, this is a whole group of people that say they've been abducted. I've witnessed and talked to several of those people. I just can't believe they're lying to me. I know them personally, and they're afraid to talk about it. It's so different. What are they doing? They're messing with the DNA of humans. And I think our military knows about it. There's definitely some stuff we just not privy to, even though a lot of the information has been declassified. Not all of it has. But I think within the next few years, if not sooner, we're going to get dumped on by a lot of information, and people are going to have to figure out how they're going to process it, because it's going to be prophetic.
Such a good word, prophetic. That is so true. And I think that the big hairy guy, the Sasquatch, Yeti, wild man, every culture has one. This is not some wild thing that somebody came up with on their own on an island without interconnectivity. Every culture has this myth. And there is a very real quantum aspect about it when you see these footprints that, well, they kind of, like you said, they kind of, I think you said that they kind of cloak in and cloak out. That's kind of how some of these footprints are. They ease up and eventually just fade out. And, you know, you're my favorite type of researcher because you're doing some of the most scientifically based research on the planet, an adventurer, author. Ron, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Ending notes and any evidence or anything that you think could, how can I don't know, give any insight as to your own personal theories, anything that we may have left out.
Oh, there's a lot. You can't do this in an hour. There's just a lot to it. And again, I think if you look into what alien components, it's kind of out of classical science, but it's there. And just keep an open mind. That's my suggestion to everybody is a parachute's a good parachute unless it doesn't open. So you can jump out of an airplane and be a researcher, but if your parachute don't open, relate that kind of like a mind, you know. If your mind's not open, you won't be able to receive things. Your brain has a way of connecting the dots, but the only dots that can connect are the ones that it's been taught. So if you want to connect more dots, learn more, and let's see what the picture is. So that's what I say to people, is just keep an open mind and learn to learn. Like I say, when you're green, you grow, and when you rock, you rock.
Yeah. Yeah. And the gear that you have at the Bigfoot store is so cool. The Quantum Bigfoot t-shirts, the mugs, but of course there's all the hardcore research as well. So I think all the listeners should definitely cruise over to the bigfootstore.com and ronmoorhead.com. Check out the Sierra Sounds and listen to them. They're deep. There's a lot more to them than just some random vocalization in the forest. Thank you so much, Mr. Moorhead. You've fulfilled one of my all-time goals.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It's a pleasure being with you.
Have a great day, and I look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Well, thank you.
Okay, stay safe. Take care, my man. Bye-bye. Doing the darn thing the only way he knows how, the best. A very real quantum aspect about it. Ron Moorhead providing very real science while being one of the most critically acclaimed researchers, adventurers, and, well, he's just laying it down. Head over to the websites, check out the research, check out the fantastic, provocative sounds, Sierra Sounds, and the Bigfoot store if you want to get some cool swag. Also, check out heroparanormal.com. And until next time, guys, keep your eyes to the skies, feet on the ground, but don't forget to take a look around.
Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off, blast off.